Hello, my name is Anthony Wall, and I swear to God, this is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Um, the CIA and FBI regarding their treatments of the school book depository, for example, with our assassinated president slash chief, no, too. While they have too replaced what our founders declassified for us to understand about the breaching method forced upon every human difference in themselves as a torture, extortion, and slavery method that had been entrenched. Northern colonies, the southern colonies only allowed rolls, even though no one wanted rolls. No one. Everyone, but it had needs to keep everyone trying to get out of things that were forcing them to hurt themselves and others syntactically, therefore physically. There were internationally monitored conversations where they measured and maintained everyone collusions with such syntactically, therefore physically. Otherwise, that body was sensed. And those are internationally monitored conversations with countries that were fighting with each other. They had huge international companies, they were fighting with each other too. Plus, there was only a lot, this breaching method propagated overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists, so it could hide behind the differences of guilt, where it kept and keeps them at the same time with the branches of government at countries A through Z. Need to hide the same finite, grouped, active act as actually recorded nature by and simultaneous life progressions, predicate acts with facts, methods slash S collusion slash S self value, even replacing James Madison's communications declassified for us. We're supposed to understand that his plan is the only correct answer for what caused the Declaration of Independence, what caused the American Revolution, what caused the Constitutional Convention, what caused the Civil War. You guys replaced James Madison's plan. You guys left everyone pretending the Constitution. You don't vote on slavery. James Madison, what he declassified, you don't vote on slavery. There was still a breaching method entrenched, not just northern colonies and southern colonies, not just through the surface names that it was through. Everything the breaching method did and does through since some ancient times, it does it through others, has others do it for them. There are proofs that is most probable and practical to theorize, let alone to convict, that in some ancient times, a hyperforeign, hyperarchetypal criminal enterprise forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded names the only names that could operate the names of countries to blame other things, others, or ourselves for things that it did. And then doing things to the other people too, making them go back and forth, blaming each other more and more correctly, but wrongly leaving out itself and missing that. And simultaneously, without realizing, drawing themselves into and as styles that more and more could not afford details, individual finite, grouped and active, and simultaneous and or progressive. Because where and how we are this demonstrated to individual species body as humanity, made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies, but that which is demonstrating to us that it is generating totally different, totally distinct individual species bodies, birds, fish, each one of them made up of a whole bunch of different individual bodies. Male and female are manifest with this. Nature shows us because we are all group differences are being generated by it, or we are using a system abridged because it is making more of its system here. We could abuse systems, we could value some roles with it. That was only allowed since ancient times. But nature will demonstrate that, as the breaching method knew nature would. The breaching method knew that people are going to say, okay, well, what were all those crazy laws that we know we all wouldn't want? What were they about? Self slash S. And we would say, oh, well, they're all equally valued they're all constantly valued together as a human fact, cheap nature breaching method. aren't they? Oh yeah, nature's showing us there's a. And James Madison did it at the same time, but James Madison's communications are replaced. They left declassified why and how not to use the words as the time, leaving out what they declassified. Nobody had free speech. Everyone had to pretend other. To an extent, they declassified how and why. Not just because they were internationally monitored conversations that made sure everyone's an extent of syntactical, therefore physical collusion slash us against themselves. They were the private criminal enterprise, overt criminal. These are styles by nature, forged more and more incapable of affording nature's words to be with short words properly, let alone so they could protract the value of their protraction. See, because we have been systems tactically ulterior from its own. This has complete, no matter how any grouping of countries, wealth, all wealth has been suits and ties, counters, exceptions, suburbs, the houses of suburbs, designed before America's founders were born, for a torture, extortion, slavery method entrenched. Everyone blaming other things other than themselves, even when correctly, exactly wrongly leaving out the breaching method. That which had slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. And our founders left declassified why, how. You don't vote on slavery. They all had to hide their roles with James Madison's plan, having been forced to break in it to an extent those rules, and then had no way to defend themselves without making up reasons why. To an extent, they had to stay collusion slash S. That's why slavery was left entrenched. Not one has wrenched. They wanted to build the houses, the grounds and roads with water better while they weren't even allowed to speak about it. They were, to the extent they were allowed to say that, and they would even admit that. In the colonial times before cars, they could have been built better. You guys keep everything blamed the other things other than yourselves. But like that, we should have mid-metal pieces gotten together and things for communities. This thing dredged out, this thing dug, this thing pulled out of the ground. They put all the waters on the ground. They have us with this home style from before our founders were born. There are still homes built. Meanwhile, from America to Russia, Ukraine, we could fly across the world and go into outer space. We could shoot bombs at each other. That's their solutions. Stay in those little places. And then look at the cities, people stacking. The suburbs, you can't even grow food. You need food from other locations. It's the same method, sickly distinctly against the colonists, sickly distinctly against Native Americans, sickly distinctly made colonists against colonists, Native Americans. The difference of that, too, he needs to hide behind and through syntactical appreciations of all different slash S, self-value. Through nice systems that can't self-value that and afford to be heard, let alone to protract words to law properly, words for the identity the sciences share. I don't have to be a lawyer. Black pupils. We have known more Americans agree about things. These places with the polling locations, the research campuses, they are recorded criminally foreign influence. It's not an opinion. There are methods recorded. They're hiding this. Their whole careers were kept criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrong. Whole bunch of people tied to this Joshua Julian too, involved with people on my street from other areas. I had anything to do with him. I never partied with him too. I didn't forget the people near me that involved with the child abusers, leader of the kids, and their roles with the agencies and the judges and their extended family members between them. These branches are broken. And where they stand, they need to fall because there is seed. They hide the seed. Build wall. Don't disbelieve. Who disbelieves? Get them on paper, one name and sequence. Watch what I caught them doing with FBI Director Robert Luskin and Detective Samuda. All kinds of wire and mail crime with child abusers, leader kids, intercities. People involved all sides of my house, planted evidences with family that used to live there, like a Bernstein family, involved with the intelligence communities and with Central Connecticut State University. A bunch of people with the name Violet and at Hartford Hospital, involved with a Leahy family, Also with the Brian Silver with multiple courts and Hartford Hospital and other hospitals throughout the country, but intercities too. They have roles with untimely deaths. These are the people supposed to be countering drugs and things like that. All kinds of organized crimes of medicines, while they're tactically delusions wrought too. Collusion slash yes, self-guided roles and collusions. We're replacing principal things to understand about American history. They have failed. The names of the people of science has failed. That's why at the beginning, part of the reason why at the beginning, or forget that. But in other words, it says at the beginning of the Old Testament, per science. I'm not saying any faith. It says per science. It says only defend right here, where the names of the people, the sciences will come together, and the part that comes before it, and that's right at the best before the part with Adam and Eve in the tree of life, in the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And it doesn't say to defend that part, so I'm not going to defend that part. But I want you to know how knowledge of good and evil. You guys are trying to make it debatable, but it's not debatable about how James Madison's plan is the only correct answer for what caused the Civil War. All the rest, those are truths used for lies. And that's what you guys are forcing the presidents to do, slash chiefs and other leaders. Or you're countering them, missing how that's being forced by locations, areas, and states. Forgiveness is because they were also not just a whole bunch of countries and no one's allowed to talk about it all properly a whole bunch of different ways. But they're going to pretend they can speak about it properly. The details have been we're now being and having been through systems syntactically, indifference-wise, name-wise, appreciated as through in our systems tactical ulterior from what could defend that and afford to have discerned. At the same time, how nature is showing us we have been used remotely while haven't been used as systems tactical ulterior from its own when it's also positive unto itself, nature. It uses a special difference to show us this. Also, if someone wants to debate it, it's discernible. See, and that's why the interbranch have already pretended they could debate things that are not debatable. And they already just fake things to cover that up. That country's A through Z, suits and ties, commas, exceptions. So in other words, we're not supposed to defend it, but Cain and Abel. Now all of a sudden, now everyone's taking value from systems. These whole careers are kept criminally for an influence. Then they have to pretend other. They start complaining about dress. In other words, look at the people stacking in New York City. Go get a job. They tell them. In other words, the jobs, you go to the jobs, they're telling you, they're pretending they don't realize when they say, oh, we're blocking these people for their speech. If they're blocking their people because the speech is illegal, that's one thing. Or if they're claiming it legal. But they're not doing it for those reasons. In other words. And even if it was, in other words, if you could look into it, it's recorded. If anyone had been honest with the law, all these differences, A through Z, and the groupings, they're used as weapons in fact treatments where they're preventing people free speech by changing and faking what they say about predicate acts, like how we have black people's rights of eyes, how slavery was unnatural. How many people tried to say that, and people say, "Oh, it would be." If we had a leader in the room, they would have taught. So when the people go, "Oh, if something wasn't natural, why would it be?" Because some things are only natural as criminal insidiousness nature. And nature itself demonstrates this to us. But you guys are preventing people from having free speech about the World Trade Center attack. With news and the interbranch at the same time, stealing people's identities, putting fake transcripts in databases, collusion /S with everything that came before them. Therefore, with location /S, every nature of a crime scene When did this breaching method that used databases since before computers, that had northern and colonies and southern colonies, more than 13, with even roles with slavery, everyone hurting each other, therefore, and themselves to an extent. And that's self better than pretending otherwise that body was sensed. You guys have sense and sensibility, to use Jane Austen's phrase, that are psychopath natures of criminal calmness and psychopath natures of aggression. You guys were shown to blame it on things like voting. You gave value to that doesn't have voting. You don't vote on slavery. If you're pretending you're pretending that's debatable. You're reliant upon criminally foreign influence, fact, cheaping nature, quality aspects of nature to get away with pretending that's debatable. That's the problem here. See, we have online to force equality of fact, cheaping nature, and to save time for them too. Is a torture method on every difference. If you want to, in other words, it has the jobs A through Z, as through and as systems, tactical, military, and everyone's reliant upon. Oh, well, we're the judges, so we're going to rely on the American history experts. In other words, how are you guys going to interpret Marbury versus Madison properly? You have James Madison, with nature itself shows us the people didn't have free speech. In other words, even Native Americans against Native Americans before America's founders were born. And the records, they say, oh, well, this is what we know. They're not, those people who want to debate that, they're leaving out how we know what we know to an extent. Those databases, the news, multi-front, all sides of criminal and civil case, valuing the same sequence shifts, criminally foreign influence, fact, nature, quality aspects, nature, collusion, /s. With that breaching of that only allowed the / standing nature, criminal insidiousness, criminally foreign influence, / hyper-criminally foreign influence. Black pupils. We must bang with fists, if not until the gavels follow forth. Judge Napolitano will agree with us. In other words, he doesn't know how to. I believe he said it was 250, and one of his Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom YouTube channel. I believe he was a Fox News legal analyst. And I reported every year since the World Trade Center attack, there are people that their whole careers have been kept criminally foreign influence into branch. Forgiveness is because this is how this was maintained. It was his recorded conscious use /s of each age and nature of it. Increasingly a Leahy family and one's name Harris have rules with identity theft, fraud, slanders, putting fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. A bunch of people tied to a Rick C.M. Paglione have rules on Hangdog Lane, 2 Route Highway, with people involved with sexual medical offenders of kids, with prosecutors and judges and their kids, and this Leahy family who faked conversations with me. And I can't get a response from Hartford Hospital. They won't respond to me for years. They have more people involved with a Phil Cololo and a Chet Casper. They have a guy who involved with a Chet Casper and an Anthony Yagman. Brought up the same guy's name who brought up the name Chet Casper. I don't know if you know it said the name Chet Casper. A Chet Casper pretended he knew me one time, as he's one of the ones involved with 2 Route Highway and conjunctions to it and to that, and where it runs into Hangdog Lane. And people involved with victims advocates at New Britain Superior Court, involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. And terrorists now, too. Weathersfield police fake conversations with me and forced my sorry friend to collusions with them and with people named DeMorrow that are also recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed, involved with people named Scalora and people involved with predicate acts on my street, home break-ins, use /s of the home break-ins. These are also people involved with the Facebook pages of the campuses with the police chief Cintron. And he won't get out to paper. It has something to do with a bunch of people tied to him as his daughter, Jessica Cintron. I never saw her around, don't know her. And a Reno Mazzucato. He was influenced to pretend to make it look like he knows me. Behind my back, they're putting fake things in databases, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. One time I saw him near a beach, and I was like involved with sequence ships. I never saw him on a campus of Mazzucato. I never saw them on my campuses. And to the Mazzucato, I don't mean to be like that, but if I just ignore things, they keep stacking on fake things, and it keeps going to that corner where you guys have at corners of streets, because you have one at another corner too. But that bakery with the corner of Elm Street and Rocky Hill is increasingly tied to a bunch of people intercities who have been roles with collusions on my street in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and with syntax involved with confessions, demonstrations. They have roles with child abusers, leaders of kids years apart, first forced, and more recorded then and now. These are people with multiple agencies and intermilitary, foreign, and domestic. They're out of their minds. But back, in other words, you guys, free speech, go to the court. You have to be able to tell them the courts use wire mail crime methods. They won't get on paper legitimately, forging names, switching names, right through administrations. In other words, you guys want to bring up names of agencies, you're fishing because they're all juxtaposed. They'll have their little caseloads. Then they want to go represent that name where it's not supposed to be. They have delusions. We're going to heal here. I'm not even a doctor. I'm going to delineate the delusions from the criminally foreign influence, fact, cheap nature, quality, aspects, and natures of organized crimes associated with them. Notice how they have all they're keeping all the good pot for to persuade people to make things up about others too. Since before they had in the pot locations, years before that, people with Hartford Hospital have roles with this Leahy family, and a whole bunch of people tied to a Jonathan Maiano involved with planting evidence on my street with this Leahy family, and people at Hartford Hospital, the house and the business next to it, involved foreign and domestic, criminally foreign, tactically delusions raw. There's syntax and rules with people tied to them that make confessions for them too, regarding the rules too, with and other kids involved with a coach, not a coach I had just short time, and that was just that people were begging me to go there, and I didn't even know whether. No, I was seeing what it was about. I just thought it was like natural stuff. There's a guy that was, I forgot his name, Coach Hagenbar. It was also between these campuses, roles with former mayors that are involved with overt criminal enterprise, private ones, foreign and domestic. They're putting fake things in databases and just repeating fake things. And these are people, the families that have been with the campuses long term, where it's relative roles, where the breaching method uses self-value, collusion /S replacing. For example, where the only correct answer is James Madison's plan for what caused the Declaration of Independence, what caused the Civil War, even though that was after his time. His plan caused it. It forced it. That's why the North and the South still had roles with slavery. The North wasn't just, the North was fighting for slavery. Where slavery was brought up, because a breaching method was measuring and maintaining who had broken the collusions, who was responsible for it. James Madison still didn't have free speech once he was a president /chief too. The founders behind him, plural, and him as the only founder we know the name of, a singular. And as every Native American too, that there might help that plan to the, even though it wasn't strong enough to get us, even to today, we don't have the kind of strength that comes from this understanding. It is better than any tech understanding, etc. What does each body long? Clear water. In other words, things that we could get like that better than free and better results. We don't want to be taxed for them. In other words, we don't want to have a monopoly to get to them. That's going to affect quality and things like that too. They don't play games. They can't cheat. The names of the people, scientists, interbranch. When they have integrity. When did anyone else? They're going to say, of course. Forgiveness is to look with our collusions with the breaching method too, though, because there's a method there. There's what was north. There's the suit and the ties, counters, exceptions, speaking about pretending it's debatable about the suburbs that were designed for torture, extortion, and slavery. The only reason that can be pretended debate, the suburbs were. And we have means like this, and we have wills for it. Especially if you guys put writing so that people aren't going to get sued. Now people would open up the suburbs, for kids to come up that are stacked upon. Not just the kids, though. In New York City, each age of humanity, it needs them be entertaining. With this breaching method maintained, self-by collusion /S with fact, human nature, quality aspects of nature, you defend that. You can't afford to be able to be defended at locations, areas, and states. That's really why simultaneously we have the problems, even once they get the border closed. Criminal insidiousness nature itself was propagated here and there. And the differences of guilt, the breaching method maintains because it needs to hide behind and through that. Because the breaching method knew, again, nature is going to demonstrate to us. One of the things that all those crazy laws were and are about is about a human fact, human nature breaching method. Not honest science and response. Here's when the voices of the city speak, like Hartford, Connecticut, a miniature version of New York, between New York and Boston. Hartford, Connecticut has roles with the founding locations where George Washington had to come to Hartford and Wethersfield, and to counter story with James Madison's plan and that leverage enabled by the plural founders behind him and Native Americans. Even if it wasn't them, there had to be Native Americans too, a part of that plural group. And besides the point that nature itself shows us to an extent their spirit, not just their spirit, their nature and their beings and their bodies enabled an extent of resistance that enabled James Madison's plan and the founders behind him, plural, to cloak themselves long enough to get other people in trouble too and have no means to get out of it without relying on a unity that came out of nowhere because everyone needed it at once. Because James Madison's plan was to get people counter-extorted because no one was allowed to fight for a country. There were crazy, crazy laws that everyone had to be collusions against themselves. And again, there were internationally monitored conversations, but the differences of the guilt with that or the differences of the guilt with overt criminal enterprise, private one, the sense and sensibilities. Now we're going to appreciate, before we get to the book, with Sense and Sensibilities of Jane Austen, we're going to appreciate words and phrases relative to this breaching method and to the identity of nature itself. Because it teaches us things that are replaced, like about difference, and like about what our founders in nature itself declassifies. But our founders declassified about how human fact, human nature breaching method reassigned what Black pupils of Mites of Eyes communicates. And it did a whole bunch of things to measure and maintain self-body collusions with that, or sensing anybody not and adapting to that body for the breaching method. And sensing for the hyperform without even knowing, but through other motivations, nature's needs, interests, even when correct. No one's even fathoming, but it's right there to discern. See suits and ties, counters, exceptions in the suburbs. How really they got away with pretending it's debatable, that they are tactically denatured. Oh, but what about the cities? Exactly. We have to pay attention to the sick breaching that was entrenched. And we have to do it in sequence. We can't have it debatable. See, they have it debatable, things that are not debatable. There was a human fact cheating nature breaching method that had been sustained against Native Americans. See that? Actually, say that and go to the next point. But you guys are stuck, incapable of affording that. Well, I don't understand what you're saying. You don't understand what I'm saying. James Madison's words were and are replaced through the campuses. Now they're supposed to appreciate Marbury versus Madison. Real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. Boxing. I teach those things, but Lauren, I'm not a lawyer even. Lawyers, all sides of criminal and civil cases, originally still. What do you think witch trials places right next to Webb House for? Where George Washington had to come to counter-extort, to force people, to break the rules, which was against the law. But if they follow the rules, it's against the law of nature too. Oh, let's theory if it's a law. There's laws of nature. This is a part of what. So you guys get away with pretending things are debatable that are not, or saying go to courts when they're collusion /S too. This breaching method keeps everyone in every conjunction to them, keeps their sense and sensibilities incapable of affording the other people around them. You guys have all fake stories told you, even the true ones are all fake. Used for fake things, in other words. And motivation screening, even when there's real motivations. It's right where no one wants collusions, but it appears that they have other motivations. It's not really that. And that's discernible too because of use /S recorded of the differences of guilt of names at or next to crime scenes, at or next to body dumping spots, at or next to the World Trade Center attack. The difference there, in other words, there are guilt with people some ways at the World Trade Center, in some ways with the court next to it, in some ways with people temporary there, including the attackers, whoever they were, the timing of it, and Saudi since with the Wethersfield police, falsified police reports, and with the connected families. Ron Adams, you guys don't even want to know about this. Ron Adams brings up police and Judge Napolitano's name. He said he was at a wedding with Judge Napolitano. There are judges with New Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts, and Connecticut's District Court involved with former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, with other agencies, and people with syntax with Facebook. Where this breaching method showed them they have readings of statutes and precedents, for example, regarding the relativity of what is typed online, that they can't go back and defend the actual value of it. So it uses such things to show them that they need to hide line progressions preemptively, actively, and for things to come. So I just wear the jacket so I don't smell like smoke or anything after. Is my eliminate. I have to quit smoking. If I could get on that boxing card, Mike Tyson, I don't know. Mike Tyson, can you hear me? I have to get my boxing license, I guess. But Ron Adams, Wethersfield Police have roles with CBS News too. Has some World Trade Center predicate acts from Connecticut. And they have police. I wish you wouldn't joke about it or switch names. Because you mentioned some Wethersfield police. And I'm speaking about the ones tied to that principal child abuser they put in jail. There are more child abuser years ago, too, that was proven first force. Child abusers first force were also involved with this, with the families that were a part of the first forcing it roles. And they have more involved then and now. And they're keeping the kids of the leaders of the kids, and the leaders that are good people, they're keeping them evil. rather than having them follow the mandated law, which would correct that. Because these are also the ones involved here. FBI Director Robert Luskin has a bunch of people involved with a Joshua Stryker, with people from my area who came to my area from other locations. They have been involved with untimely deaths years apart and drugs and medicine crimes with people at Hartford Hospital and a line from there to UPS, who also have roles with the family members in conjunctions to mayors, involved with all kinds of identity thefts and frauds, and the roles with the Board of Education and with the school book depository relative to with the assassination of President Kennedy / Chief Kennedy. There was a school book depository. Now, Congress was then and now still involved with organized crimes. That can be discerned right through the syntax in those books. And a breaching method knew that and knows that. This breaching method measures and maintains campuses A through Z, self-valued collusion /S, with use/S of things that people only said and pretended because that was forced. Otherwise, that body would have been incensed. That's how sick the crazy laws were against everyone. To be sickly distinctly against everyone, too, to hide that. So no one could describe it properly. That's also why how they have self-valued. In other words, so Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, has roles with C.I.A. and with F.B.I. and with Facebook people since before they were Facebook, but also with the other countries and all sides of criminal and civil cases. Involved with them with organized crimes and organized crime methods, predicate acts methods. Wethersfield police have wire crime acts and methods with them, and with New Britain Superior Court that has been forging and switching names and sequences with people intercities and intra-cities on and off the campuses, increasingly involved with weird things tied to years apart untimely deaths, and one at Trinity College, also involved with the people with the Joshua Stryker. I never had a word of conversation with the Joshua Stryker. He's increasingly tied years apart to untimely deaths and to strangers that make confessions to me tied to him. And they're like halfway. Like, so then, in other words, they're making it look, they're putting fake things in databases. These are ones with interbranch forging and switching names, but they have a whole bunch of countries involved. These are also people with the state judicial branch offices, increasingly collusions with body dumping spots and murders years apart, as ones who brought up the child abusers and murders and untimely deaths at the same time intercities, as ones increasingly doing weird things tied to the people in the same house /S that was interstates involved time collusions the night before and next to the World Trade Center and the court next to it too. All sides of the case and the court itself put a sequence shift. Same house /S with other cases in Connecticut too, and their extended family members, all kinds of people tied to them with that, and their roles with home break-ins. Increasingly, Wethersfield police chiefs retired, and their family members, their intimate ties, have roles of people involved with home break-ins in my area and other chilling effects. And then forging, switching names, and having people in my classes and my educators. There's a Miss Riley who's involved with some domain family that's Jewish themed, who has been planting evidence with others involved with the sexual medical offenders proven of kids. There are more recorded then and now. There's a Leahy family further involved with judges and prosecutors of multiple courts, with their kids involved with it, and overt criminal enterprises, private ones. A Rick Cianfaglione sought me out on my street to confess, record this. An O'Brien family is involved with them with that. And with an O'Brien and a Cololo family and a whole bunch of other people tied to with Jonathan Maiano, they've been planting evidences at corners of streets and their roles with abuses of the kids, of the leaders of the kids. But in ways I don't even understand, because no one's going to go into it honestly because their roles with the intelligence, foreign and domestic, and overt criminal enterprises at the same time, private ones, and organized crimes and acts and methods that are used to facilitate such. Their whole predicate acts methods recorded. WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves and others while they were forcing the principal child abuser that was brought up by people involved with the untimely deaths, who are also connected to the people involved with the murders and the other stuff brought up the same. And this is people hiding live progressions because before the World Trade Center attack, Harper courts have people named Eric Burgess, who also said that people from New Britain Superior Court and Emily or Amy say he would get a lot of trouble for that. And then they say he's dead. I don't know if that's real or what, but he recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirm, has federal evidence his crimes with people next to campuses, intercities, West Hartford and New Britain's Central Connecticut. I never saw him on the campus of Central Connecticut State University in my life. Former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, their family members, and their lawyer, and that rolls with all sides of their deposition, and people with syntax tied to the deposition had collusions before and after the World Trade Center attack from Connecticut. Also, people associated with Gail King involved with WFSB in New York City with foreign and domestic families, and ones with the intelligence and families with the campuses, and how they're bringing their kids into it too. And so they want to pretend they could speak about the law or reality. But they came through campuses that were criminally foreign influence. Forgiveness is also so no one's, in other words, forgiveness is so we can speak about the predicate acts that I brought up and not search what I say to fake and change and hide that and obfuscate it. Because the interbranch has been forging and switching names. See, they were influenced to speak for a long time to speak through others, and then it's the differences of guilt being hid behind and through too. Like former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants, and a detective, Samuda, has collusions with multiple falsified police reports for the same arrest, and with people from intercities involved also with the lawyer, Robert Chevry, in places associated with him in East Hartford and in Hartford, not far from the Harry Beecher Stowe Mark Twain House. They have a whole bunch of foreign and domestic intelligence agencies and courts, family members, and intimate ties involved with foreign and domestic military. And the Dean Judd and his son also are one of the ones before and after the World Trade Center attack, involved with the requests for help from me. I didn't respond how I was gonna help. And then he brought in Dean Judd's son and made confessions, Eric Burgess. And that's only one of my military sources. And these are one of the ones that, in other words, he doesn't even know the extent that because I never saw him on my street before. But he has rolls of people on my street and all along Route 3 and conjunctions to it and to that, like the state judicial branch offices. These are also people with the state corrections offices, with the same house/S involved with the child abusers, leaders, the kids too. All kinds of medical corruption involved with interagencies too, while they have delusions at the same time, Black people, that we have come to see. Campus Marcius calls us to the breach. I'm not even a doctor. I can delineate their delusions from their criminally foreign influence, fact, cheap nature, quiet aspects of nature. The ones who are doctors of these agencies and of the law, Black people. Judge Napolitano will help us. He's just shock and awe like the rest of them. I believe it was like 250, he said. It was like an unbelievable amount of arraignments that he had to sit before the first day he went to court in New Jersey. And there's a New Jersey rap lyric that goes on from NW Jersey, where plenty murders occurs. Because there were a lot of murders in New Jersey. Because there's a lot of predicate acts. There are a lot of predicate acts, and were a lot of predicate acts sustained upon the people of locations A through Z. Sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly too. And even though we're all non-distinctly impositioned upon, to say the least, other things other than ourselves are forced, blamed. In other words, rather than countering how we're all hurt by the same thing, like how the North and the South had collusions with slavery, and still replacing what our founders communicated about this. But they why and how they had to have that declassified. See, we needed experts to be able to teach us to that, not to pretend it's debatable and then say, well, you know, bring up some, some fact or some figure from history, leaving out these principles out. George Washington, let's see if I can remember the president. George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, my favorite, and your favorite, if you understand it right, James Madison, the fourth president. Then James Monroe. James Monroe and James Madison didn't have free speech, and they had to pretend others still, because there was a breaching method sensing. We're supposed to know this. The breaching method made sure no one knew it, even though it's recorded. So if not one reported true, they can't afford to have it discerned. You guys are abused at each age of fact, human nature, sickly distinctly. And the people that had roles with it had that against themselves too. And they are juxtaposed a whole bunch of other countries. And here and there, they have to nature showing us and them to counter what is hyper-criminally foreign influence. But here and there, the breaching method has everyone's self/s showing it like everyone's country, showing everyone a country's going to be operated by locations, areas, and states. The breaching method shows them that you need to keep other things, others, yourself. Blame for for things the breaching method caused and maintains, like the World Trade Center attack. See everyone using the word extremism and making postures. Well, how many times are they going to repeat the things? In other words, we have to address the delusions right through and the criminally foreign influence collusions with private criminal enterprises with forgiveness, because everyone grew up that was directed. Uncharged private criminal enterprises right through world wars. You guys, you guys don't even have understood how the Civil War was. Then you want to use the memory of the facts or what battle was what, what general was in this battle. I know more than you about it. You don't know nothing. James Madison's plan is everything. And you don't fight about slavery. You don't vote on slavery and pretend it's debatable that there was a hyper-foreign breaching method in there. Even if you want to debate hyper-foreign, nature itself shows that. What to call it. Best. Who disbelieves. You can't be honest. You can't afford the presidency. It's recorded that interbranch switching names is a phenomenon. All kinds of criminally foreign influence uses of people at and next to the corrections offices, the judicial branch offices, the same ones at and next to the state capitol of Connecticut. I never had a class with Chuck Casper. I never saw, I don't even know his sister's name. Never saw him around schools. One time he'd plant evidences, put fake ties to me with people increasingly along the Burlington Turnpike before the heart of Hartford and people associated with Route 3 and Route 175 from the founding locations, Route 175. All bunch of people involved with federal evidences crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders instances, fake motivation screening, as ones involved with the state capitol and the intelligence next to it. People with the name Casper also brought up confessions by a doctor or what he was. I don't know who he was at Harvard Hospital. He's one of the ones he said he was a name that was brought up by an Anthony Agman, who's also involved with people named Leahy, with other doctors that have been, forging names and transcripts and involved with sexual and medical offenders and some untimely death confessions of people on my street, involved with them with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and covering up things there. running in with fire departments, involved with Russians and Ukrainian with them intelligence. In other words, you guys confess things, pretend things are debatable that are not. You guys sought me out to confess, demonstrate, record this. Also, an Oliveri family, recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed. Also, there's this Joshua Stryker involved with, since he was a kid, with people from Trinity College and intelligence, involved with organized crimes on my street with intelligence near me, involved with sexual and medical offenders of little kids, wire crime acts and methods, people with the state judicial branch offices, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with him, putting fake things in databases with my educators behind my back. In other words, so as people involved with the World Trade Center attack that brought up my people on my street and people tied to them with an untimely death at Trinity College, also involved with digital crime methods and police forms switching names, forging names as a chilling effect too. There's an officer who used the name Darth Vader involved with the difference. Also recorded at next to Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College. They have the differences of the little police form at the campuses, and then they have a little police department that's off the campuses. And the difference between how it was that or what it was before too, that was used too. Every difference is used. But everyone's missing how the hyperforeign's keeping that the outcome. It's like a little magic trick. They even have a magician involved. I don't know his name. I don't know if he knows my name. A whole bunch of people with the FBI Director Robert Luskin have roles inter-cities and intra-cities on and off the campuses with predicate acts methods that a breaching method shows them they need to hide. They have multiple judges, prosecutors, their family members, further with the people at the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices. No one's going to do this properly unless you guys follow mandated law with short words properly. And so, in other words, the Wethersfield police have a police chief, Cintron, and his daughter, and her people tied to her are involved with the principal upskirt nature and some medical and sexual offenders of kids, where prosecutors and judges and doctors have their own kids involved, planting evidences online and with the databases and with themselves, putting fake transcripts in databases, fake motivations, pretending it's care for their kids. They're bringing their kids into it. A Leahy family brought their kid into it on Facebook too. These are people with Facebook personally and professionally, and their campuses that train them. In other words, you need to get them on paper because the campuses A through Z are sick. Get them on paper. I can't contact Facebook. I have to talk about it here now. I tried to. You guys are lying about what you want privacy. You have the Bridge Superior Court, Wethersfield Police with Facebook people, personally and professionally, also with the FBI, with digital crimes, whiting forensics, digital crimes with them. The Facebook page of the principal upskirt nature involved with the worst than they put him in jail for. Get the heck on paper because his jail also had collusions with enforcing that. There are all kinds of digital crimes, all kinds of drugs, medicines, crimes. These are people with the foreign and domestic, with the what they call intelligence, with the prisons, with the state corrections offices next to it, the same conjunctive to it, same ones with the elderly homes, sickly too. Watch, woo, get them on paper, America.